Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of Rants. Hopefully it doesn't come across too ranty and more like an organized list of complaints. So last month was the 10th anniversary of my favorite game, probably my favorite work of art in general, Bioshock. Even though I'm not going to review it yet, cause that would take forever, I'll give my thoughts on the latest game in the series, Bioshock Infinite. It was a highly praised game, even rivaling its contemporary, The Last of Us. So is it as good as the original? Is it as good as The Last of Us? Was it worth all the hype? Nope. No, it's not. Actually, this was probably my worst experience in playing any game. Not that it's the worst thing ever, but it just makes me upset. Sad even. If you enjoy Infinite, more power to you. You haven't had one of your favorite series ruined. Why is it so bad, you may ask? How could the Bioshock series spawn such a tragedy? Well, let's take a look, or rather, let's conduct an autopsy on Bioshock Infinite.
Is a better home awaiting in the sky, in the sky.
The story was one of the things so critically acclaimed about Infinite, but in reality, it's probably the most disappointing thing ever. Your character, Booker DeWitt, travels to the floating city of Columbia to find a girl named Elizabeth. She's the daughter of the city's leader, Comstock, who's meant to fulfill a prophecy by bringing justice to mankind. Once you find her, you have to get her out of the city in order to pay back a large debt. But of course, Comstock doesn't let you just waltz in and out, sending waves of soldiers to halt your progress. Besides being another Save the Girl story, it's literally the exact same thing as Bioshock 2, which came 3 years before. Just replace Elizabeth with Eleanor, Comstock with Dr. Lamb, Booker with Subject Delta, and Columbia with Rapture. It's the exact same thing. Eleanor was the chosen one who would save the world. She too was locked up by her parent who led the city, and her dad comes to bust her out. Well, Booker's Elizabeth's real father, and Delta is, well, let's just say, her foster father. Seriously, did the writers think they would get away with replicating the same exact story? Ken Levine, I'm looking at you. But to be fair, Infinite is more about escorting the girl out of the city, while 2 is about finding the girl. And there is a poorly handled Infinite Universes gimmick, hence the name Infinite.
What the hell is that? Everyone's got a gimmick now.
Then there's the ending. It feels less like an ending, and more of an explanation of everything going on behind the scenes, just in case you were too dumb to figure it out. I was already disliking the game, but once the ending hit, I was floored. Elizabeth goes on about how there are infinite universes, and then proceeds to take you to the first level of the first game, and drabs on about how it's one of many realities. No, stop. Not only does Infinite have to be bad, but it has to take the first game down with it. The ending also serves as a giant contradiction to the rest of the game. So after killing Comstock, Elizabeth decides she wants him dead in every universe. Wait, Elizabeth, you may ask, if there are infinite universes, how can you kill every version of Comstock? Oh, player, she responds, don't try to bring logic into this. And this is far from the only contradiction in the game. About halfway into the game, you need to bring weapons to the rebel group, the Vox Populi. In return, they'll give you your airship back to escape the city in. The problem is, you find out the gunsmith is already dead. Elizabeth's solution is to jump into the timeline where he's alive. Only problem is that he's insane. If you die in one reality, then you'll be insane in the others. Wait, you say as you ask again, if there are infinite realities, then wouldn't you always be dead in at least one version of the universe, making you insane already? Oh silly, Elizabeth replies, stop bringing logic into this. So you find gunsmith Chen Lin insane, so he can't make the weapons. Then Elizabeth sees a reality with the weapons already made. This is the final reality hop. Only in this reality, the Vox have already risen up. You prepare to ask another question, but Elizabeth is already shaking her head. Instead of constantly jumping realities, why not just summon the weapons from their reality into yours, like Elizabeth has been doing the entire game? Why does she insist on going into their reality instead? It was at this point that the game started to collapse, though the ending was like putting down the dying horse. So besides being a ripoff of Bioshock 2, the plot is so random and makes no sense. I mean, what even is this?
Elizabeth?
It's a doorway. One of many. This way.
What do you mean it's a doorway? Where are you going?
Oh, come on. Yes, it's this way. Look at that. Thousands of doors. Opening all at once. My God, they're beautiful.
What, the stars?
I thought once we were here, I could fully control it. I thought...
What is that?
It's a key.
Where did it come from?
It's always been there. I just couldn't see it.
I ask you, what importance do these scenes have? Why did we need to spend 5 minutes in Rapture? The game goes about in explaining the whole infinite realities concept in the longest, most drawn-out way imaginable. Like I previously mentioned, you play as Booker DeWitt, a man with a troubled past who acquires a large gambling debt. To pay off his debts in New York, he travels to Colombia to get Elizabeth. And yeah, Elizabeth is his daughter, originally named Anna, but he sold her for cash. The man he sold her to was Comstock, another version of himself. He needed an heir, so he came into contact with Booker from another reality. Booker felt guilty about being a Pinkerton and participating in the Battle of Wounded Knee, so he went to get baptized. In one universe, he accepted the baptism and went down the path to becoming Comstock. In another, he refuses it and stays Booker. So Anna gets transferred from Booker to Comstock. Feeling guilty, he drinks a lot and gets the letters AD tattooed on his hand. I don't hate the character of Booker. He's not as sympathetic as Jack or Subject Delta from the originals, but he's serviceable. His best moments are when he's contrasted with Elizabeth. He's more grounded and hardened than she is. She's a bit more naive and fun-spirited. Elizabeth spent her whole life locked away and observed by scientists because of her power and prophecy. So of course, when you have someone who's been isolated their whole life, they become fun, upbeat, and sociable. Wait, what? Why is she so fun and extroverted? If someone's been isolated forever, you'd expect them to be awkward, curious, and probably scared, not knowing anything about life on the outside. But no, she's energetic and fun, because it would actually take effort to show her have emotional progress. Even though Elizabeth's upbeat personality makes no sense, she's still pretty likable. And that's the problem. The writers put no effort into her character, but since she's fun, everyone will like her. Besides that, what makes the characters not work for me are all the stupid choices they make. Like I said before about the weapons and the ending, Elizabeth insists on hopping into the reality with the weapons when she could have just brought them into her reality instead, like she's been doing the entire game. And of course, you can't kill every Comstock when there are infinite universes. It's called infinite. Why she tries is beyond me. The game ends with her drowning Booker during the baptism, because somehow doing this will kill every Comstock? What about the universe with the different preacher, where Booker was sick that day, but got baptized another day? What about all the other possibilities? The game just forgets all that. But why would Elizabeth drown her own father? This unleashes the grandfather paradox. It goes something like this. Say you go back in time to kill your grandfather for whatever reason. If you kill him, then you'll never be born. If you were never born, then you can't go back and kill him. If you can't kill him, then he'll live and you'll be born. It's a paradox. Clearly the writers didn't think of this when they threw this jumbled script together. As for DeWitt, in the beginning before being hunted down, he sees this poster. Clearly the AD tattoo is one you don't want to have. Booker sees this and goes on about his business. What? Booker makes no attempt to conceal that he's basically the Antichrist to this city. Then a few minutes later, he's told not to pick the number 77 at a raffle. Okay, I won't blame him for picking 77, because you don't know which number you'll get, but I can blame him for being so apathetic to his situation. He just accepts that he chose it, even though he was explicitly told not to. Booker makes no effort to get a different ball or to discard it. Just like being the spawn of Satan, he nonchalantly accepts his fate. Towards the end of the game, as you approach Comstock's ship, Booker says,
There he is! We need to land below and fight our way up to him.
Or we can just fly this thing to Paris.
Wait a minute, what?
We can just fly this thing to Paris. Fly this thing to Paris. Fly this thing to Paris. Fly this thing to Paris.
This entire game, You've been trying to fly out of the city using the First Lady airship until it got crash landed. You fought wave after wave of enemies to get it, but this entire time, you could have just used one of the dozens of police ships scattered across the city. This entire time. It's so hard to sympathize with characters when their decisions are so profoundly stupid. Ugh. Just look at Subject Delta in Bioshock 2. This is a guy you sympathize with. He was just a diver who accidentally spotted Rapture. He was then imprisoned and turned into a big daddy, forced to wander the halls with a creepy girl for the rest of his days. And just doing that gets him killed. Then after being revived, he has to travel across the city where everyone's trying to kill him before he goes insane. I really feel for him. Booker, on the other hand, would be perfectly fine if he wasn't such an idiot. So that's why the highly praised characters in Infinite didn't work for me. While Bioshock and Bioshock 2 take place in the underwater dystopia of Rapture, Infinite is set in a new location, the city of Columbia. Instead of being hidden below the Atlantic, it floats in the sky. Visually, it looks nice, but there are deep social issues throughout. The game is set in 1912, but Columbia still uses black people as slaves, and the Irish population is treated as second class. There are plenty of examples of deeply disturbing racism throughout the city. Even though the Founding Fathers, who were profoundly anti-slavery, are worshipped, John Wilkes Booth is hailed as a hero for assassinating the great emancipator. My problem with this is that it never goes anywhere. The game never really does anything with it. The Vox are comprised of poorly treated African Americans, but that's about it. And this may sound wrong, but Infinite makes slavery seem not that bad. Yeah, being enslaved sucks, but you never feel its sting. No one ever gets whipped or beaten or anything. The worst that you see are segregated bathrooms, a mob humiliate an interracial couple, and blacks scrubbing the floor. It's really missing that harsh element of real slavery. It's not that I like seeing people mistreated, but you're not going to feel sympathy for them otherwise. I admit, that's more of a nitpick and not a major element of Infinite. My biggest problem with Columbia is that it's too much like Rapture. By that, I mean that the two cities share a lot of similarities, although they're from two completely different time periods and run on distinct political ideologies. Take the Vigors in Infinite, for example. They're the same as plasmids from Rapture, special potions that provide superpowers. Plasmids and gene tonics allowed the average person to do the craziest things by altering their genes. They allowed people to become faster, taller, stronger, but they also allowed people to shoot lightning out of their hand and shoot fire and summon a swarm of bees.
Not the bees! Ah! Open my eyes! Ah!
Plasmids, though, were a fundamental piece to Rapture. They play a major role in the city's backstory, as they contributed to the city's collapse. Everybody was splicing their genes. It was a big fad in Rapture. The lack of morality and government restriction allowed scientists to create such scientific achievements. As things in Rapture fell into civil war, people spliced more and more to defend themselves from the war and the crazed splicers. The increased splicing caused the citizens to go mad, leading to the survivors wanting more protection through splicing, and so it snowballs. As for Vigors in Infinite, they're just there. You never see anybody using them besides a few special kinds of enemies, yet they're all over the place along with their advertising. They're literally just thrown in the game without explanation besides they were in the original. The same goes for the turrets, mosquitoes, handymen, weapons, and audio diaries. Rapture had all these things because of objectivism. Rapture's ideology allowed unhindered scientific discovery, so it was able to go wild and create all these things, eventually leading to its demise. But Columbia doesn't have the same ideologies that made such scientific discoveries possible, and that's forgetting that Rapture came after World War II, while Columbia is still the pre-World War I era. I know that the DLC touches upon this, but the explanation makes no sense, and it contradicts all the games, and DLC barely counts as the game itself. My last big issue with Columbia is that it was advertised as a living, breathing city. Unlike Rapture, it's still functioning, so it would make sense to interact with the citizens. Disappointingly enough, the extent of the interactivity is buying a hot dog from a vendor. The absolute worst part, my least favorite point in the game, is in the shantytown. There's a group of vendors with an infusion on their table. Infusions provide a boost to health, salts which power vigors, and your shield which allows you to take a hit without losing health. So of course I really wanted this. The problem is, there's no way to barter or talk to the vendors. The only way to pick up the infusion is to either steal it, resulting in a fight with them, or to kill them first, then take it. So much for an interactive, living, breathing Columbia. The only form of interaction is shooting. So to sum it up, in Rapture, everything was connected. Everything made sense in the game's context. In Columbia, nothing is well explained or fits the rest of the setting. Now, I don't hate Infinite's villains, I just find them forgettable, which isn't much better. 3 villains are coming to mind, but maybe I forgot a few because of how forgettable they are. Zachary Comstock is the main antagonist. He's the city's fundamentalist leader, and really, I don't have much to say about him. He's just kind of... He's got nothing on Andrew Ryan and Fontaine from the original, but he's not awful. Another villain is Slate. Again, forgettable. Boy, do I long for the days of Sander Cohen, a crazy artist who plasters people and puts them on display. Finally, there's Songbird, easily the most interesting one. Songbird is Elizabeth's guardian. He makes sure that she stays in her tower on Monument Island. Even though he's basically her captor, he's also the only friend Elizabeth's ever had. So as you try to escape the city, he comes at the most inconvenient times to halt your progress. The game builds up to what you'd expect to be a cool boss fight or an intense sequence, but no. You learn how to control him and use him to take down blimps via button prompts. What a completely wasted opportunity! Songbird also never seems like a threat until he's on screen. He's a giant robot birdman who's hunting you down constantly, yet you never feel his presence. There's no threat looming over you when there should be. Maybe what the writers should have done is, every once in a while, as you roam large portions of the city, have him screech, signifying his presence, and make you have to hide from him for a brief moment. Just something to make Songbird feel present. The monster from all the advertising that keeps showing up and wreaking havoc, that even has his own poem that kids recite, who the game keeps building up, doesn't get a payoff. Even his relationship with Elizabeth doesn't get enough attention. He's built up and thrown out just like that. What were the writers thinking? Ugh, again, this is after this.
I remember when me and the crowd put you in that sub. You were no more than 2. You were my ace in the hole, but you were also the closest thing I ever had to a son. And that's why this hurts. Betrayal, kid. Life ain't strictly business.
And remember this?
To build a city at the bottom of the sea, insanity. But where else could we be free from the clutching hand of the parasites? Where else could we build an economy that they would not try to control, a society that they would not try to destroy? It was not impossible to build Rapture at the bottom of the sea. It was impossible to build it anywhere else.
Not only are the villains in Bioshock Infinite completely forgettable and wasted, but compared to other Bioshock games, they're so lacking. Man, Songbird is so disappointing. Bioshock is the spiritual successor to System Shock 2, but realized that to be more accessible, a lot of RPG elements had to be taken out. Bioshock Infinite goes even further and simplifies the gameplay to the point of resembling a shoot-'em-up COD kind of game. Maybe this would be fine, but yet again, it takes too much from the original 2 games, so the Call of Duty elements and the Bioshock elements don't mesh well. A good example is the Handyman, Infinite's copy of the Big Daddies. In Infinite, you spend the fights running around like a headless chicken because the gameplay doesn't support this fight. In Bioshock, Big Daddies brought all the gameplay elements together. In Infinite, Handymen tear it apart. You can't carry multiple kinds of ammo or more than 2 guns like a Call of Duty game or Uncharted, so you're constantly searching for more ammo. And you also can't carry first aid kits to heal yourself, so having an enemy that can kill you in 2 hits makes no sense. Again, you're running all over just to look for more health after every hit. They're really annoying to fight. What made Big Daddy so good, besides having a gameplay that goes hand in hand, is in part because they don't fight you until you strike first. So you get to plan and create elaborate traps. You get to choose when, where, and how you'll fight. Maybe you see a room full of oil drums, so you can pile them on the floor with telekinesis, and then place a mine over them. When the Big Daddy steps on the mine, boom, they're dead, or at least severely weakened. So it brought all the gameplay elements together, and you would experiment with everything you had. In Infinite, handymen are just thrown at you randomly. You don't get to prepare for them. Similarly to handymen, the boss fights are awful. The same problems occur. Not being able to carry more ammo and health makes you run around headless chicken style. The game makes you repeat the same annoying boss battle 3 times in like 20 minutes. Waves of enemies are thrown at you as you try to bring down the bullet sponge boss. And every time you die, all your enemies, including the bullet sponge, receive more health. It's like the worst. Another perfect example of gameplay elements kept that make no sense is how Booker eats from the trash. Yeah, seriously, he eats garbage. In the first 2 games, Rapture was in complete ruins. There's nowhere to find food besides rummaging through cabinets and trash bins, so it made sense. But Columbia's still a living, functioning city. Booker can find food anywhere, yet he eats from the trash. Everything is just thrown in without much thought. Like, upgrading your weapons is a gambling game this time around. You never know what 2 guns you'll have in 5 minutes, so upgrading them is a guessing game. Perhaps you pump money into the machine gun. Whoops, too bad, you won't find another one for an entire area. This gets even worse when the number of guns gets doubled about 2/3 in. So the odds of finding the guns you've upgraded gets halved. So now you need to upgrade a whole new set of weapons. You can't mix the 2 weapon limit from COD and Uncharted and gun upgrades from Bioshock. I think the origin of a lot of these problems may not just be trying to appeal to the mainstream shooter fans, but Elizabeth. The creators needed to find some use for her, but the only way they knew how was to nerf Booker and give half of his abilities to Elizabeth, making her seem useful. But if Booker wasn't nerfed in the first place, then she'd be completely useless. Think of the things Jack and Delta could do that Booker can't. They can carry first aid kits, carry Eve hypos, carry every weapon, hack security, hack locks, and carry multiple ammo types. Now what does Elizabeth do? Throw you first aid, salts, guns, ammo, summons turrets, mosquitoes, picks door locks, and safes. Literally everything she does would be pointless if your abilities didn't get limited. So maybe that is a great way to make her seem useful. Just completely handicap the player. This trick worked on most of viewers. I get that it's hard to make an escort mission fun, but the way Elizabeth is treated is horrible. During a fight, she becomes a non-element. She just disappears and hands you stuff. Even though Elizabeth's extremely important to the city, none of the enemies even acknowledge her existence. She can't get hurt and doesn't need any protection. Irrational Games, just because you can't come up with a good system, doesn't mean you shouldn't at least try. The same goes with hacking. In Bioshock, you can hack machines, safes, and locks. You can either play the normal hacking game, buy out the objects for a fair price, or use an auto hack tool. Instead of trying to make a system that's even better, Infinite just cuts out hacking completely. Now the only way to own a machine is to either have Elizabeth summon one, or use the Possess Vigor to control it temporarily. The latter option is ridiculous, because you can't even damage a possessed turret. You literally have to wait for the Vigor to wear off before destroying it. So you can't shoot it unless it's shooting at you. Yup, definitely 10 out of 10 gameplay. When playing Bioshock Infinite, I can't help but think of the theme of choice. Every choice we make creates a ripple effect. Taking the baptism caused Booker to become the leader of Columbia. Any decision we make has unforeseen consequences and creates a new timeline. The only problem is, the gameplay entirely contradicts this. Throughout the entire game, you're presented with several choices. Do you throw the ball at the interracial couple, or the host Jeremiah Fink? Do you recommend Elizabeth take the bird or the cage? Do you point a gun at a suspicious man on the phone? Do you kill or spare Slate? Some of these seem like pretty big choices. Because I expect my decisions to have a ripple effect, like the themes would lead me to think, I thought long and hard about each choice. Ultimately though, none of them mattered. In a game about infinite possibilities and how one decision can change the course of history, your choices meaning absolutely nothing, I find really upsetting. Okay, so maybe not everything about Infinite is complete trash. There are a few aspects that are good. Like I mentioned before, the visuals are astonishing, especially for its time, and that was 4 years ago. Maybe some of the details won't hold up today, but overall it looks stunning. Easily one of the graphically best games of its time. The voice acting is also fantastic. Troy Baker is probably the most renowned voice actor in the industry, and for good reason. He plays Booker and he's just fantastic. So is Elizabeth's voice actor, Courtney Draper. A lot of their character interactions are also well done and make the characters feel more lifelike. My favorite scene probably being the almost hidden scene when Booker and Elizabeth jam out together.
Guitar.
Will the circle be unbroken by and by, by and by? Is a better home awaiting in the sky, in the sky?
Credit where credit is due, great scene. This is the first Bioshock game in which the protagonist talks, and they definitely took advantage of the opportunity. And no, the 5 seconds of Jack talking doesn't count, and neither do Subject Delta's grunts and groans. Even though I completely trashed the gameplay, the skyhooks were a great addition. Zipping around through the air gives a wonderful sense of openness that you'd expect from a city in the sky. Whenever you're on the skyhooks is when you're having the most fun. I also enjoyed the amount of exploration in the game. There are plenty of hidden buildings and rooms in the game to explore outside of the main storyline. One more thing I liked are the motorized Patriots. These are George Washington robots armed with Gatling guns. They're funny and a nice touch to the hyper-nationalistic setting. And they don't contradict every single gameplay element like the Handymen. So yeah, it's not all bad. Overall, it's obvious that I hate this game. Not only is it a disappointing spin-off to my favorite game ever, but it's a flat-out bad game. Yeah, there are a few positives. There's great voice acting, breathtaking visuals, and the skyhooks were a cool addition. But sadly this isn't enough to make up for all the atrocities Infinite commits. The gameplay makes zero sense. The interactivity comes down to just murdering. The characters are idiots. Songbird is completely wasted. The villains are forgettable. The story was lifted straight from Bioshock 2. None of the choices matter. It has a contradictory ending, and Columbia is trying way too hard to be Rapture without understanding why Rapture worked so well. All of these problems lead to a bland, frustrating, and sad experience. Now, I just want to make myself clear, I don't hate Infinite for not being like the originals. In fact, some of the worst parts were when it tried. Whenever I referenced the previous games, it was only to show how they got something right, where Infinite went wrong. Not that Infinite wasn't enough like them. So, yeah, I didn't like this game. Oh well. Maybe I should just look at the positives. There are plenty of things that Infinite didn't ruin, like Little Sisters, Sander Cohen, Splicers, Fontaine, Jack, Ryan, Suchong. Would you kindly... Wait a minute. Oh.